the Twister Sister, and we've got another question and answer video today. So we have a question from Vestigioful. I hope I'm saying that right. And he says, my friggin' Qualitex balloons are popping easily. Any ideas on how to keep them good? Well, Vestigioful, I've got a few pointers that I'd like to share with you. Now, none of these are, you know, like a guarantee that your balloons won't pop, because they're gonna pop because they're balloons, and that's just what happens every now and then. So, but if you're really having problems with a lot of your balloons popping, there's a couple things that you can do to try to limit that from happening. So first of all, I would definitely check the age of your balloons. Sometimes, unfortunately, you can buy balloons from somewhere and they send you old ones that have been sitting around in their storage for a long time. So on the bag of your balloons, there should be a date, and that will tell you when they were manufactured. And so if they're more than a couple years old, that could definitely be something causing you issues. Although I personally have balloons that I've had for years and years and years because they're odd or different weird colors that I never use. And I can still work with them. You do just have to twist more carefully, and I'll talk about that in a second. The other thing, of course, is the brand of balloons that you're using. Now, I like Qualitex and I use them almost exclusively. I don't have anything against the other brands of balloons out there. It's just what I'm used to and what I use. But if you go and buy your twisting balloons at like a party store or Walmart, who knows what brand they are, those aren't necessarily made with as high a quality as some of the more popular brands like Qualitex. So, and I know in your comment you said you were using Qualitex balloons, so this doesn't really apply to you, but for anyone else watching, the brand of balloons that you use does matter, and some people get very loyal to one brand or the other for this very reason, because certain balloons pop on them more often than the other brand. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, the other thing to think about would be how you're storing your balloons. You always want to keep your balloons out of direct sunlight and even away from a lot of heat. If it's really like muggy and humid where you are, that could cause the balloons to start breaking down quickly. Balloons are biodegradable, they're latex, and so they pretty much just return back to nature somewhat easily. And so as soon as you blow them up and they're in the sunlight or out in the elements, they will start breaking down. So you just want to make sure that you're keeping them inside in a nice, cool, somewhat dark room. A lot of people have said that they've had success storing their balloons in the fridge. I'm not sure if you want to do that or if you have room in your fridge, but there are people who say that that's helped them. Now, another tip that I can share with you about trying to minimize your poppage would be your actual twisting technique. So, I don't know how experienced you are with twisting, but a lot of times when I'm training new twisters, I see them using certain techniques that will increase the likelihood of their balloons popping or breaking. It just, the way that they do adds more stress to the balloon. So you want to limit the amount of stress you're putting on the balloon as much as you can. And so I want to demonstrate that for you. So in general, the more your balloon is squeaking while you're twisting it, the more friction you're making, and friction will kind of, there's rubbing and it can cause ripping and all kinds. So you just want to decrease the friction and the stress on your balloon. So a lot of times new twisters, let's say they want to twist a loop, they'll take their balloon and just start yanking on it like this, and there's just a whole lot of squeakage. And when you're twisting, these balloons right here in the joint are just rubbing up against each other, and that's going to create a lot of tension and friction on your balloon that could cause a pop. So what I do when I twist, especially with certain kinds of balloons, is I use my fingers and I try to pull the balloon apart as I'm twisting it. So my fingers are actually in between so the balloon isn't rubbing against itself. So to explain that, let me just show you with a simple loop. So when I make a loop, I'm going to pinch it and twist. And as I'm twisting, this hand is actually pulling these balloons back and away. And this hand is actually pulling the loop part away here, and I've got my fingers in between so that the balloon is never like rubbing against itself, and I've got some space in between while I'm twisting it. And that, if you try to keep your balloons separated as you're twisting it, if that makes sense, that will help you to limit how often your balloons pop. So that's just one technique. So same thing with a pinch twist. Let's see, so I'm going to do a pinch twist. I'm going to take the pinch twist and actually pull it out and away from these two balloons. And I've got my fingers pretty much in between there the whole time. So when I'm pinching that pinch twist, it's not just like rubbing on the balloon. I'm pulling it out and away with my fingers so that there's less rubbing and friction being created. Now the other thing I mentioned, the type of balloon, certain types of balloons do tend to pop more, in my own personal experience. So jewel tones for me tend to be harder to work with, and the pearlized balloons also tend to be harder to work with. They're fine, you can use them. You just have to make sure when you're twisting them to really like use your fingers to keep things separated so you don't get a lot of that squeaking and sticking and friction. You just don't want friction. Nobody wants friction, it's bad. All right, and then of course my last tip I think would be to just make sure that when you're twisting, your balloon is nice and soft, especially if you're gonna be doing pinch twist or lots of loops or stuff that's a little bit more intricate. I always squeeze my balloon as I go and as I'm working on it. Now there are certain cases where you want it to be nice and tight, but for the most part, just keep, every time, before you make a twist, just give your balloon a little squeeze to make it a little bit softer, and that should help you reduce popping. So those are some tips for me. I hope that one or all of those was helpful to you. If you guys watching have any more tips for how to keep your balloons from popping so much, go ahead and leave those in the comments. I'd love to see what your suggestions and ideas are. And if you have questions for me that you'd like me to answer in a future Q&A video, you can also leave those in the comments down below. Thank y'all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!